Okay, guys, thanks for joining the call. And I give Tyler the word then. Tyler, you have the word.
Well, again, today is similar to last time. I didn't have a specific topic in mind. I do have an example that I might share depending on how the conversation goes. But um, before I do anything, does anyone have any questions or anything or any topic that they want to go through or chat about to learn about? You can either unmute yourself and talk, or you could put your questions under AMA questions and then we can discuss it. I give like a couple seconds, see if anyone's interested. Okay, I don't see anyone typing or anyone muting, so I'm gonna assume that uh, people are shy for now. Any questions? Sorry?
We are here, bro. Listening to you.
Cool.
Just keep on.
Cool. I guess let me just share my screen a little bit and kind of discuss an interesting example. I'm not sure what everyone's level of trading or expertise in, uh, what your levels are, but I think this particular example shows a lot of things, and I think there are a lot of key takeaways that could be taken out. So this example that I kind of want to mint. So for those of you that aren't familiar with Goda, this pass essentially, it's like a mint pass. So if you Goda, they specialize in art. So the very famous contemporary artist in the traditional art world. And Goda is kind of like her first entry into NFTs, and the first art drop. Mint. So they had 24 hours to mint, and there's only like 1,000 people who could do that, or however many owners, 700 owners, and then like Nina Chanel's team, the Goda team also minted close don't particularly care about the project will mint as long as there's profit to be made. And with that mindset, if you're someone with whitelist, technically it doesn't matter how much profit, right? Because as long as you can break even and the amount of ETH you make is above 0, then you should mint, right? Like 5, I would still mint it even if I had whitelist and script get like 0.05 profit. So I would do that. So with that in mind, naturally people will start undercutting, right? Like so, okay, so because that is my experience, right? I know that something like this is likely to happen. Of course, there's an odd case where during the whitelist it could pump, I guess, right? It could pump really high. It's possible, but in this case, for me, I was like, well, volume isn't very high. Price is price is not very indicative of what it should be because all of these people are Goda mid pass holders, and Nina should know herself, right? So the price range here is a lot higher than what I think it will become. So I initially held on, right, because it was 1 ETH, and I was like, okay, well, it did go to around 1.2, maybe it's gonna basically dip a little, and then maybe it goes back up, right? Maybe it's a start of an upward trend and whatnot. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna wait, and because I know that Goda has support from a lot of project founders and reputable people, and like a day before Snoop Dogg announced that they were partnering with Goda to support like artists that are going through Goda. So I was like, okay, since that's the case, maybe if he tweeted or if he mentioned something about it, it could lead to a pump later in the day. Well, he did tweet about it, but it didn't gain very much traction. So unfortunate. I've seen cases where people like him that's actually reputable within Web3, not just some random celebrity. If they tweet about it, they say they basically advocate for a project. It could potentially lead to a pump. So I was like, okay, there's a decent chance because that's one example. There are a lot of other examples, like the founder of Doodles buying a Go to Mint Pass like a week ago, and then like 9gag CEO also buying one a week ago. So there are a lot of potential influencers that could lead to a mini pump. So I was like, okay, well, it's possible that it goes back up, right? But then like it was getting later at night. It was probably around like 8 or 9 p.m. And then the next day in the morning, it will be whitelist mint, right? So everyone will be able to mint. So I was like, you know what? I don't care what price it is now. I have to get out. Right? If I don't get out now, tomorrow is going to be way, way lower. So that's what I did. So with that in mind, I listed around point nine something, and then another one wasn't getting sold, so I listed it at 0.79 or whatnot. So it probably got bought around here, the second one, while I was asleep. And then there was a mini pump. It went back up to like 0.86. And then you see over here, this is around when whitelist people commit, right? And then obviously, because whitelist people commit, price went down. Because a lot of people are here to flip, right? And it doesn't matter. As long as you can make something, it's worth minting. So that's exactly what happened. That's why, I didn't want to risk this happening because I know that this typically happens once whitelist opens up, especially if you have the privilege of minting beforehand. I saw this with Moonbirds as well, right? Proof Collective people could mint before anyone who won a whitelist spot for Moonbirds. So price pumped initially. It pumped to like, I don't quite remember, like 11 to 13 ETH floor, I think. And then once everyone that won the raffle could actually mint, floor price went to around 6 to 8 ETH. So it dips. So that's why there's opportunity. You can, if you genuinely believe in a project and you have whitelist, that's what I would do, right? Like I would sell pre-review, wait for it to actually dump. So yeah. Anyways, that aside, so here after the whitelist, they're able to mint, then price went down, right? Especially when volume is not super high, which was the case for Nina's Super Cool World. There was volume, there was decent volume, but it wasn't like strong volume. So if there isn't strong volume, that means that demand isn't very very high, right? And in order for price to actually go up, demand has to outweigh supply. But in this case, because volume was not that high, and people were listing more and more, naturally, all those listings aren't getting bought up, and then people will start undercutting, which is exactly what happens here. right? People were like, okay, cool. It goes down, and then there's like a mini pump to like 0.7, and then it was just downhill from there. Like people were like, okay, no one's buying. And then it's just basically stuck very, very close to mid price, right? If you sell anywhere around this range, you would either break even or lose money because mid price was 0.5. And then if you account for royalties, gas, all that, most of them will probably lose a bit of money. And then here, clearly, that's when review happened. And then, the rares get bought. But floor obviously tanks, right? So around here, 0.3 or whatnot. Now, what's interesting in this graph is these two straight line ups. Now, this is like, it indicates there's something unnatural going on. Like it could be market manipulation, it could be floor sweeping, and in this case, they were floor sweeps by Nina herself. She actually announced it like a little later in the day. I don't quite remember what. Like, yes, sometime yesterday, I think. But I think this is good use case or good example of how floor sweeps a lot of times they don't work because like she swept. I think she utilized 40 ETH in total to sweep Nina's Super Cool World floor, and clearly her goal was to try and get the floor price up to 0.5 and above again, right? Because the idea behind this floor sweep is like, okay, I want to raise the floor price, right? That's a lot of the reason why people do that. Now, of course, that's not the reason she said, right? She said like, oh, it's for the community vote, so that she could give like people trying to enter NFT space, which I'm sure there's truth in that, but I'm sure also that she did it because she wanted to try and maintain a floor price of above 0.5, right? Because it doesn't look that good that floor price is below what you mint it at, and this is her first Genesis drop. But whatever the reason, it doesn't matter, right? Because it shows that floor sweeps don't really work. Because after she swept the floor from like 0.3 something to 0.5, this is artificial demand, right? Unless like this isn't by one person or one entity, which in this case it was, floor really can't sustain at whatever price it got swept up to. You'll see this across collections. It doesn't matter what collection it is. Whatever floor price is swept to, it will nearly always, I guarantee it, within 12 hours, it will go down, right? Because that isn't a true like indication of what demand is. The price settle at a certain point because that's where equilibrium is. Like that's like the medium between supply and demand. People are like, okay, this is the price it's at. So it can't sustain, right? So it ends up going down again, as you can see from this chart, right? That's the floor. And then like obviously she did another sweep, right? She did a sweep, went up to 0.5 again, and it still can't sustain, right? You look at the floor price right now, it's 0.41. Give it like a couple days, maybe a week, I guarantee you it's lower. Well, there's an asterisk to that. Let's say that she does have like a huge partnership lined up. There's some huge news or new development, or having this gives you a whitelist to something else semi soon. Then sure, that's a different story. But in 99% of the cases, I guarantee that goes lower. So this is a good example where if you believe in, let's say you're bullish on Nina Super Cool World, right? And you think you want to hold it for a year or whatever like that. Then in my opinion at least, in my strategy, what I would do is I would sell everything pre-review if I had any holdings, and I will buy like maybe a week or two after floor price has settled. And because you can get great deals. Now, even now, like a day or two after review, there are still some people holding out hope that floor price will increase or that it will moon, all that. But you give it a week or two, a lot of them will lose faith. And then you could snipe rares for a lot cheaper than you could have even during review. Now, of course, upon review, there will be people who misprice rares. But a more consistent way is you give it some time. People that are holding rares that were hoping floor to moon, they'll get impatient and you can get steals. Right, so you could get like a top 100 for below 1 ETH or whatever like that. That's just one example. Or if you just want exposure to this project, you could just buy a floor, right? You wait for floor to go down, which I would assume it will go down to 0.3s, maybe even 0.2s in 3 days or a week or two. probably, assuming there's no catalyst. Then you could, gain exposure that way, right? You could buy floors or buy rares if you, prefer rares. Yeah, and when there's low volume, like you give it a week or two, when there's low volume and there are not that many sales and people get impatient and listings are quite high, and by high, it depends. In my experience, usually average listings is probably like 10 to maybe 15%. But if it's high, I would say if it's higher than maybe 12 to 15% range, I would consider that high personally. I'm sure people have different metrics that they use or different percentages that they consider to be high. For me, low listings is anywhere below probably like 8%, and 5% range is like super ideal. It's like low listings. Just because it's low listings doesn't necessarily mean that people aren't going to be willing to sell, or floor price will increase because of that. But it is a good indicator, to kind of determine what how many people and what type of people and what price people are willing to sell that specific NFT for. It gives you an idea, but of course, it's not like the truth, the source of truth or whatnot. So just keep that in mind. But so let's take a look at Nina Chanel, her super cool. Right now is around 900, since they're around 5K items, plus minus nearly 20% listed for sale. So that shows you there's a fair amount of people that are trying to to get their NFT sold. And then let's take a look. You can literally just eyeball it on OpenSea, right? Not that many sales, right? You look at the time, not many sales per hour. So what this tells me is that because listings are pretty high, and there's nearly no sales volume, and this is just after review, right? Like I think review was yesterday, if I'm not wrong, or 2 days ago. Then the hypothesis here is that floor price should drop, because all these people, they're like, well, no one's buying my NFT, even though I listed it at floor, no one's buying it, so they're gonna undercut. And then as time goes on, other people will get impatient, or desperate, right? Or they just want to get out. Then they will have to list at floor or undercut floor. So this is probably what's going to happen in this case. But yeah, and that's why there are opportunities. If this is a project that you care about or you're bullish on, then you can probably get steals off the floor or even just rares a little bit after review. So I think this is a really good example. It shows you a lot of things, right? Like the initial pump where people with Goda could mint, right? That people are like, oh yeah, and here, because it's not very like, it's not fair to just look at a chart this way, because you don't, the volume here was actually super low. It wasn't very high, all things considered. And only around like a couple hundred people were participating in this. So obviously floor price and all of that could move up, a lot, very easily. And then of course there weren't many listings initially as well. But yeah, I think this exemplifies a point where usually it's better to just sell pre-review, and don't get greedy, right? Like if there's going to be an event where an influx of people are able to mint, and whatever this price is before that event happens is fairly above mint price, which is the case for this case, right? Like mint price was 0.5, floor price was around 0.91 ETH, and clearly there's money to be made. So you shouldn't be greedy if you are in this position. Usually, what I recommend is you should just sell. Right, sell in this range. Let the event happen, right? Because after that event happen, usually floor price will go down. Now this doesn't happen all the time, but it happens a lot. So if you kind of practice this strategy, I guess, or philosophy, in the long run, it does bear fruit, at least in my experience. But yeah, it's a really nice example. I think the charts are very pretty to kind of describe the situation, right? And then obviously here, a bunch of people like sniping rares and stuff. Throw back holding. That's a good question. I don't hold any of them anymore. I sold 3 of them. Whether you should hold depends on what you think about the project. Now, I guess I can share my opinion. This is not investment advice, by the way. My opinion is that I think this could actually be a good long-term hold, um, because I mean, just treat it as fine art, right? And if you're unfamiliar, Nina Chanel is probably one of the most successful or well-known living contemporary artists of our time. She has a lot of influence, specifically in North America. So when I'm investing in things long term, and especially for fine art, I like to consider the trajectory, like the career path, or the upside of an artist. Um, and to me, I think Nina fits a lot of. She checks a lot of boxes as an artist, right? Because she's a person of color. She identifies, um, there are basically a lot of factors that make her like an ideal modern day artist. That I think she has a good trajectory, um, given time, right? Like she's obviously very well connected, right? She started Goda with Pharrell Williams, I think, and I think one of the advisors is the artist of Cause as well, right? And her work is displayed in like the MoMA, a bunch of very, prestigious places. So as an artist, if I was trying to bet on an artist and an artist's work, Nina Chanel does fit that bit, right? And Nina's Super Cool World is her Genesis NFT art collection. So if you believe that NFTs are here to stay, and you don't think that her reputation is going to go down the gutter in like a month or so, I would say like it's not a bad long term hold. If anything, it could pay off well, right? Now, of course, we don't know how people will perceive this in a year or two. You never know, right? But with the information we have now, her reputation, her connections, all that, I think it has promise. Yeah, yeah. So that's some of my thoughts. Not sure if I helped there. Just wanted to, share some of my, what I know about her at least. I guess what are you thinking yourself? Like, what do you know about what are your thoughts? Like, were you trying to flip, hold, or you can unmute by the way, so you don't have to just chat.
Uh, I think in general we have soon a new meta. All this, all this art, all this NFTs will really looks like art, not just profile pictures, because there's a few new NFT collections coming in, and they're all about art, and they're real artists who really make some art, and people buy this and like this. So I think we will soon have a new meta in this case, because trends are always changing. But I don't care. It's just important that all this, degen-free things meta stops, because I think it's pretty annoying, in my opinion. It's really annoying because a lot of people makes a lot of money with this because they're using bots to mint this stuff, and then they sell it immediately all for very cheap, and other people buy this in, then it goes all to zero, and the most people lose money with this kind of things, and people starting to understand this, and that's why I hope that this degen meta will die soon, and we will get again more serious NFTs, so they're more interesting in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with a lot of things.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, for art projects or art NFTs, at least if it's by an established artist, ideally with like collectors that like their art, um, they're a lot less likely to go to zero, right? Like let's say we did go into a recession, sure price will decrease, right? But do I think like for example Nina, like do I think this collection would go to zero if in like a year or two? Highly, highly unlikely, right? Because I'm going into this knowing I'm buying fine art, and fine art in itself has intrinsic value, right? Plus, as long as the artist is that artist, um, it shouldn't go to zero. So it's safer as opposed to you buying some degen or free project. Most likely, you give it a couple of weeks, it will go to zero. And even a more established NFT project that's like a a company or tech company that's trying to do something, like for example, start a game, develop an app. Even those are a little bit riskier, right? If you ask me, um, because you don't know in a year or two where that's gonna go, right? You're banking on the success of that app or the game be, coming into fruition and actually paying off, right? So there's some uncertainty there. But when it comes to art, it's a little bit different, right? Or something with historical value, for example, like CryptoPunks. Do I think that will necessarily go to zero in the future? Probably not, just because it has a lot of historical significance, right? I don't care like what you think about CryptoPunks themselves, like what it's worth, what that image is, but the fact is that people recognize it as pretty much like the OG PFP NFT, right? So it's very, very unlikely that it just tanks and goes to zero. So it's kind of similar in the case of fine art. But of course, you need to find the right artist, right? In Nina's case, she has sold things for hundreds of thousands of dollars or millions of dollars before, right? So the point is, she is an established artist with a portfolio, track record, all of that. So I don't think her art is just going to depreciate in value tremendously and go to zero, right? So if I was gonna bet on her, and if I think that this is just a start, right? Is her Genesis piece, and she's gonna become a lot more involved with digital art in general, and maybe become a major player. Then perhaps if I think that way, then I should like sweep this floor and hold for a while. But yeah, it just depends on what you think. So that's a little bit. I think that's in line with what World Dancer was kind of talking about. But yeah, I was also hoping that there was some catalyst that wait for connections, that would kind of prevent floor price from dipping. But then because volume was fairly low, I was like, that's highly unlikely. And we're still in like a bear market, right? So I didn't want to take the risk. So I just decided to take profit, secure profit ahead of time. And like if I wanted to buy in and hold long term, I was just gonna wait for like a week or two for floor price to go down. Because even if there was a catalyst and it went up, and it pumped really hard, it will probably go back down just as quickly, based on what I've traded before. So that's why I did what I did.
If I could toss in my 2 cents,
Yeah,
I've
go
actually
ahead.
got about 20 cents. But first of all, it is a super interesting chart. I love looking at charts like this. I love icy tools. There's Alpha Sharks has decent charts too. Because these charts tell a story, and if you aren't accustomed to looking at them, I know people who are like, "Oh, I hate charts. It reminds me of, math class or whatever." You really need to start to see the story. Just like if you open a book and there's words in that book, if you don't know how to read, it's just meaningless squiggles. But if you know how to read, it opens worlds to you. It's the same thing with these charts. This chart tells a very clear story. One thing that's super interesting to me is there used to be the phenomena of the pre-reveal pump. And that obviously isn't happening here. It's just going down, 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 and then reveal happens. Now, is that because the reveal wasn't far enough in the future from the mint? Was it too close in time? Or is it a bear market phenomena? Because it's still got this downward momentum from all the new people flooding in and driving up listings and driving down demand, and then there's a reveal, and then so it almost argues for waiting longer for the reveal if you're going to do it that way. And then there's projects that reveal instantly, so then it'd be fun to compare this to a chart for a project like that. So that's idea number one that I wanted to put out there. Number two is, you're talking about the kind of the insiders that get that first buy, and then the white lists. And of course, with a lot of projects, then there's the next wave, which is the public mint. And if it gets to public mint, well, now you really have to worry, because now you have a ton of volume, again, a ton of listings coming in, and people who are more likely to be paper hands, to undercut. And so then those charts are going to have another wave of just pushing down the value. But as far as reading the story of the chart, one thing I like to do, especially with something like this, because there's a few question marks here, right? Like you can't tell everything just from looking at the chart. So, you can definitely look at it and figure out when the reveal is. If you've looked at enough of these, you know what that looks like. But what you identified as her doing a sweep, I wouldn't have known that necessarily just looking at the chart. But you can figure it out really easily. In this digital age that we're in, there's so much information available. So you can go to the Twitter account for this project, or you could join the Discord, look at the announcements. Uh, if you can't figure out from those two, start reading the general chat. But you can figure out usually pretty quickly, especially because everything has a timestamp, and this has timestamps. You can figure out very quickly what happened at that time, what happened at midnight, what happened at all these times. It helps if you can convert from UTC to other times quickly in your head, but there's websites for that if you can't. So I wanted to put all that out there. The last thing, and then I'll stop talking, to the relief of everyone, I'm sure, is that you really, if you're going to get into art market NFTs, it's a very new space. It's a much smaller group of people that are into fine art NFTs. This one happens to be on OpenSea, but a lot of them are on other specific sites that are specifically for fine art NFTs. And a lot of them go for a lot of money. I mean, just a lot of money. And if you're going to get into that, I highly recommend educating yourself about the art market in general. It's a completely different market from the NFT world in a lot of ways, and the way people value things, how famous the artist is, are they getting a lot of buzz? How many multiples are there? Are there, 20 of the same image, or is there just one of the same image? You can look at the print market. With actual prints, is it signed by the artist? Is it just initialed by the artist? How many were done? And so on. So if you're going to get into this stuff, it would really help you to understand that market. And it's a fascinating market, and you can make money in that market too, just like you can in NFTs. So with that, I will stop talking, but you've flooded me with ideas.
Awesome, awesome. No, I love it. Love it that you're sharing. But yeah, it's very different, right? Um, when it comes to trading art.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a whole other ball game where you need to know, like what Mark mentioned, like a lot of
Yeah.
other stuff. But yeah, so if you guys are interested in potentially buying more digital art, definitely recommend kind of brushing up your knowledge of how people value things. It's a little bit different from how I would value some DGen NFT project, for example. Very different. Yeah, even long term, right? Like, why are you holding it long term? It could also be a very different reason. So just something to keep in mind. Mhm. But yeah, so this was like the main example that I was kind of looking forward to kind of sharing with you guys because it really showed a lot of stuff. Like you can tell a lot of stuff. And yeah, as he mentioned, right, when it comes to normal projects, let's say there's only whitelist and then a public sale, um, you could see a graph similar to this, but like this area probably would be the whitelist folks, and then wherever the public sale, once it's open to the public is, there'll be it'll be very clear. Like if you look at the charts, it will be a very clear area um, of high volume. Uh, Now, how price behaves, of course, like it depends. But quite often you would see some sort of dip, and then like a run up again, or it could do this. Um, but yeah, that's a different chart. Um, but yeah, I mean, if you guys aren't actively using resources out there that you could, you should, right? You don't have to use IC. There are other tools out there that can show you this kind of information, and it can arm you with what to do, right? Like it can give you the knowledge to really identify like what do I want to do here? Does it make sense for me to do this? Like should I list now or should I hold? Blah blah blah. All of that. It's very useful to do that. So you should get into a habit of doing it. And if you see something abnormal or something you don't understand, you should try and figure it out, right? Because once you learn it, then you'll know it. So if you see it again in the future, you'll be able to recognize it very easily. I'm sure when I first started, I didn't really know what something like this would mean. But now that I've seen it a bunch, it's quite obvious to me. So yeah. I guess anyone have any questions or insights that they want to share? Feel free to either unmute or just tag me or just ask a question.
Yeah, I guess one more thing I'll toss in is there was a recent sale by, I think it's Immutable. Let me find it, what their name is. Yeah, Immutable Image. They teamed up with Canon. They had a release before. It's fine art photography. They just did another one a few days ago. Both of them did horribly. It's all selling below mint, or most of it's selling below mint. Some of the rare ones, it's like anything. The super rare ones are doing well. The ones that aren't as rare, which I think the least rare is like a 50 collection. So it's the same image 50 times. 50 different people can own the same photograph from this NFT collection. Those are all below what the mint price was. And and that's, a sort of a tangent off the fine art market. This whole area of the NFT market, I think, is very, very young. And so if you bought into something like this, I would, if you cannot sell at a profit right now, I would definitely, not financial advice, but me personally, I would buy and hold for something like this and just wait and see what this market ends up doing, because you've got two things going in your favor. One, there's less competition in this market. And so you're probably getting in at a decent price. And so again, familiarize yourself with the normal art market. I also put a link to Super Rare, which is one of the more art-oriented NFT marketplaces, and look at what stuff sells on there for, and see how many editions there are of the things that are selling for less or for more. Get a feel for it. And maybe you buy something just because you like it, which is why you should be buying art anyway. And then 2 years from now, 3 years from now, you've got this thing that came out early in the NFT art market that has a lot of upside and very little downside potential. It's like you were saying, is this going to go to zero, or is CryptoPunks going to go to zero? No, because there's a historical aspect to it. There is she's going to continue making art. She's going to continue becoming a bigger and more famous artist. She's young. So she's out there marketing for you and increasing the value for you. So the more you understand these market forces, the better odds you have. Nothing's for sure, but the better odds you have of doing very well in something like this.
Yeah, exactly. Very well put. Agreed. I think someone asked a question in general. Give me a moment. Okay, so the question is, what do I think generally um, about art projects, I guess? Well, that's a very broad question. I think art is great. I think a lot of people have the misconception where, well, I guess like a bad, and not necessarily a good development where everyone is expecting utility out of literally everything, which shouldn't be the case, right? Because if you're for fine art, for example, like why am I asking utility from the artist, for example? There's no reason, because it is like it's completely different from asking whether, I don't know, like a project promising to do something like start a game or whatnot, whether they have utility, and sure, but there are cases where you don't necessarily need utility, and I think people don't understand that, and not that, and I think maybe you could just not be the consumer, right, that they're looking for, right? They might not be looking for an NFT degen to buy their thing. Like it is completely different. Like if I'm an artist here, in doing NFTs, I want people to actually enjoy my art, right? I don't want people trying to buy my art to try and flip it, necessarily. So I think the way you look at a project, or you know, it should like you basically should be more open minded. So in this case, I can understand what you mean, where is not much value to hold this NFT, sure. But maybe that's not the way you should look at it, right? Like maybe someone is buying it just because they want to own a piece of Nina's art. Um, and if you're someone that's trying to flip, it might not necessarily be like the best project for you, right? And that's fine. That's okay. And I'm sure you still managed to make some money, right? Like you sold it at 0.68, mid price was 0.5, so you would have made a little bit. Then that's good. And then you basically got out. And yeah, if you don't think that it will appreciate in value long term, or you don't want to hold, or you don't think it will appreciate at all, then just don't hold it, right? Or don't buy it. So that's basically what I think about art projects in general. If it's a project that if it's like a free degen project that says buy just for art, that's a different story, right? That one is like okay, sure, no utility, and then like it's just a degen mint, right? Like you're trying to trade like everybody else. It is a pump and dump. That's what it is, right? But in this case, for someone like Nina, this is not a pump and dump. It is art because she's selling you fine art, but it's not. I think like you shouldn't look at it as it's just art. There's no utility in this specific instance, right? It's not like buying goblin piss or I don't know, like whatever random art project out there where it's just art, no utility, just for fun, just for laughs or whatever. And it's like, you don't even know who started the project. Then yeah, you probably shouldn't hold that, right? But in this case, this is different. So, general utility about rumors and well, yeah, that again, right? So I think you're taking the mindset more of an NFT flipper or degen, which is perfectly fine. I myself do that too. Um, but that you can't really apply that mentality to every single thing out there. And I don't necessarily think that Nina's project, kind of falls under that category, I guess. I understand that, it'd be nice if, I don't know, there was like a huge rumor, or that led to a huge pump or whatnot. But you can't really count that. Yeah. I don't know. I guess what do you guys think? Anyone else have any thoughts?
Well, since everyone's being shy, I'll toss in 2 more cents. I think that the art market in general is something that can be very intimidating for people who have never been in it. But there's so much to learn and so much to enjoy there. And I've frequently thought that NFTs and NFT flipping and all of that are actually kind of a gateway drug for a lot of people into the art side of things. There certainly are those projects that skirt that edge between, is it a profile picture or is it an art project? Some of them kind of are closer to art and they're doing something much more interesting. And so then you get into something like this one, Nina's project, that's more kind of a pure art or, illustrator art. It's certainly moving more on that side of the spectrum and getting into, and it mimics her actual art that she sells and that she's already been very successful with. And so the one thing I would put out there is if you do find it intimidating, but you find it interesting, go ahead and dive in. The beautiful thing is we've got the internet. You can really educate yourself. There's YouTube videos. There's just, I put the link to artsy.net. You can spend all day just looking at stuff that sells on there and how much it sells for, how much they're listing it for, how auctions work. And it'll help you in your trading of NFTs. It all helps.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think Bro answered that. Or like made a comment where the floor price for art projects will keep bleeding with other categories, right? And not necessarily. I really do think it depends on artists. And we've seen like fairly recently, maybe even like right now, I think there has been like fine art pumps, right? Like, and just like with stocks and just like with normal NFTs, the price of art also fluctuates. Um, so I think it's still very young industry. So I'm definitely not an expert in art at all. But yeah, I could see why price would go down. Um, if there's no catalyst of any kind. Um, but again, I think the way that a lot of art collectors think is a little bit different as well. And from what I've noticed, a lot of times it does how willing they're able to spend, or how willing they're willing to kind of spend bucks on art. A lot of the times it fluctuates with the market as well. It's like when it's a bull market or whatnot, they're willing to shell out more cash. And when it's not as good, less money around to play with. But again, I'm not an expert with art specifically. But yes, I have seen there are collections that are just meant to be art that could go down naturally, right? Because you know, um, there's not as much demand in the sense that usually the pieces, there are not as many pieces, and then volume dies down slowly, and then naturally some people, they need to unload and price goes down. But I wouldn't say I'm an expert on this, so those are just my thoughts or what I've seen in my short time doing art and stuff. Right. Okay.
I find there are two websites about this all art. I think it's kind of marketplace for this. I will write it down. Wait a second, guys. And AMA questions.
And then a question on Saudis. I haven't been tracking it at all, but my sentiment towards it is the same as last week, where I just consider it more as a project that within a couple of weeks should go down significantly. Um, and it already has been going down, right? I don't know what it was like last time we chatted, probably like around 1 ETH. But last I checked, it was definitely lower than that, and I think that that's only going to continue, given more time.
To this too, I'll write it down and you can check this out. But yeah, it's pretty interesting because it looks like yeah, this kind of art is a new meta. So, and then a lot of different artists will join this kind of stuff. And at least it's more interesting, than projects, all this stream and BS, because it's just annoying. If you checks the charts, and you check the volume to all these different projects, that's are all projects for 0.001 ETH or something. So people just trading them left and right, and spend gas fees and don't get nothing about this. It's like a lottery, it's like a lottery where people hope to get the next Goblin Town, and it's a little bit annoying.
It's also interesting because, I said that NFTs can be a gateway to the art market. It works the other way too. They're selling NFTs at Christie's and some of these traditional art auction houses now. And you're going to have more as, younger and younger people are coming into that market and looking for places to spend their money. They're going to be looking at NFTs. They're going to get tired of dealing with Christie's and their huge fees. An auction house like that, you're going to pay at least 25% on top of whatever the winning bid price is, because that's how auction houses work. They're going to be looking at these NFT marketplaces and realize how much value there is there. So I think this is an area that has a lot of growth potential. Not financial advice.
I agree. I agree. We're still very early. Right?
Very, very early.
A
Very,
lot of
very
time.
early.
So yeah,
But if
no
nothing
one's.
else, if you look at these markets, you'll understand, what the value of these things are. The prices for traditional art have been settled over decades and decades and decades, whereas the prices for NFTs, it's such a speculative market. What are these really worth? And what is that really based on? So it would give you a better understanding of ways to value visual arts and things like that. I mean, what's the Mona Lisa worth?
Yeah, check the website article.io. I found
Okay.
this. I put it in the AMA questions. It looks like a website for different arts.
Uh-huh. Yeah, that looks
And the old one, Nifty giveaway. I still get emails from them. It's a more old one, but they have also more, real art. Wait, I put it also down here. Wait a second.
And I would also encourage anyone that's looking at this stuff and thinking, oh, that's kind of cool. At some point you might want to look into actually buying things in the real art world outside of the NFT area. You would be amazed, especially in the print market. You're not going to buy a Picasso painting, but you could get a print that, Picasso did 100 prints of and signed them and own that. You could get something by Miro. You could get something by, whoever your favorite artist is who did prints. And sometimes these are remarkably inexpensive. With prints, if it's a little bit damaged, there's a little bit of wear to the paper, or it's small, those aren't as desirable. And you could own something by a world famous, internationally famous artist and have it in your home for what you're paying, for less than you would pay for a Bored Ape. So it's just something for people to think about. There's a whole world out there.
Yeah, maybe art in general will become much more famous to young people because of NFTs.
Right.
What
That's
I
what I
think.
hope. That's what
Yeah.
I hope, because it's something
Yeah,
that can
it
really
makes
make
sense.
your life.
It makes sense. I think it will, to be honest.
Yeah.
I think it will.
Yeah, I can see that
Yeah.
happening. Like even
Yeah.
for myself, I would never have bought art in general before NFTs.
Yeah. Right
But
now it's interesting, right?
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. And Picasso's not going to rug you. He's
No.
dead. He can't
Maybe
do it.
maybe the middleman was sold to you. He can
Well,
rug you with a
that's where
fake.
you have to be careful. You have the issue of provenance.
Uh,
How do you know it's real? With the real art market, we don't have that problem with the NFT market, which is what makes it fascinating, is it solves the age-old problem of how do you know that this is real? And not only
yeah.
that, but you can tell who owned it before. So maybe Snoop Dogg owned the NFT that you bought. You can prove that through the blockchain.
Yeah.
Whereas, someone might be selling you a car, an old car, and say, "Oh, this used to be owned by Paul Newman or whatever." Well, how can you actually prove it?
To
So,
be honest, I have in general a theory that maybe in 20, 30, 15 years, all the NFTs which were generated in this year will be very valuable just because of the age,
I think so too. I think so too.
Yeah.
I think there's
So all these NFTs, which are worthless right now, could be very, very valuable. Let's say in 200 years or something when we don't live. Can happen.
hopefully
Yeah,
before then.
it's realistically. I mean,
Yeah,
because you cannot fake the date
right.
on the blockchain. It's not possible.
Yeah, it's a fascinating thing to think about.
Yeah.
well, cool. That's all I
Okay.
had today. Yeah.
So great topic, Tyler. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks a lot.
Sharing your thoughts as well. Appreciate it.
Thanks a lot, and thanks to all the new guys who joined for this AMA. As I told, I will give you yes, the OG role, and yeah, and soon I will create also an OG chat. So I would like to discuss with you different things, so how we can push this project, right? And one important thing, of course, soon I will start different marketing strategies. So random people will join, I hope. And then of course, then I need a little bit more of your help. So you will interact maybe a little bit more with them. So we will start to create, a small group which helps each other. This would be really cool. Yeah, and if you don't have any kind of questions, and we can think, yeah, end this AMA. Okay, Tyler, anything else? Okay, guys, then thanks a lot for joining, and I hope I see you then next time. And make sure to, as soon as the new roles are ready, make sure to go to the roles channel and yeah, get your different roles. So I will add different roles, so you will just notified for specific topics to make it all organized. Okay. So thanks a lot for joining, and yeah, have a nice day. Bye bye.
Take care, guys.